All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. Today I'm talking with Derek Crager, the founder of Practical AI and creator of PocketMentor, a voice-accessible tool that helps manufacturers simplify training, reduce downtime, and support their teams in real time without adding headcount. He's bringing a practical, no-hype approach to how AI can solve the workplace knowledge gap on the shop floor. So, Derek, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. Appreciate you inviting me here. I noticed last week, there's supposed to be an Indianapolis theme with the Indianapolis 500 going on. Last week you had Chuck on and he actually grew up in Speedways. I feel like you're doing an Indiana theme, so I appreciate it.
And the Pacers won last night at the buzzer, so I guess that's a good thing.
Pacers are rolling. It feels like it's the late 90s again, and then the Fever start up tonight.
Oh, there you go. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm not really happy about the Pacers, but since they beat the Cavs, I am cheering them on because I really don't want to see the Knicks take it. Sorry, New York fans.
You know, I don't apologize to New York at all. 90s was the 90s, and the Knicks and the Pacers back and forth. And you mentioned Cleveland. I was born outside of Cleveland, Lisa, so we've got that in common. Even though we've got the Pacers here, I'm still a Cavs fan.
There you go. There you go. So what is it about your background that led you to finding AI and to doing all this cool stuff with it?
To be honest, I grew up a bit different. I'm actually discovered when I was 50. I'm ASD, autism spectrum. I'm also ADHD by definition and a little bit dyslexic. So I had kind of trouble fitting in normal life. So I picked up, what can I do outside of work? And technology was always a thing. Swing that all the way today. AI it's the new wave. The internet wave hit from 1990 on. It really didn't take hold till about 2006. Same things happening at AI. We have the same pushback that we did for the internet wave when it hit, and we're only a couple years in. So we're going to have that negativity, and I feel that we just need to keep that voice out there and say, hey, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's just another piece of technology that we can leverage to our benefit, and it's not going away.
It's interesting. A year or two ago, I had a guy on my podcast who was late diagnosed on the autism spectrum. So how did you at age 50, and I know this isn't really part of the question, but how did you at age 50 discover that?
I suspected for quite a while, and I meandered around different online communities and recognized different symptoms and philosophies. So it's like a soft RCA. And I just got to the point where I said, well, let me talk to somebody, and that it helped. It helped having it in black and white after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's such an important thing because there's so many people on the spectrum. But when we look at great sources for employees and people who can get the job done using things like technology, it's a really good resource. Let's go to talking about AI. So what were some of the gaps or recurring challenges that you saw in manufacturing and really the current training or support systems weren't solving?
It's a great question. And anybody in manufacturing knows, and your audience knows, we've been short skilled trades in manufacturing for 30 years or so. And I actually came through an apprenticeship, journeyman. I worked industrial construction at the big three automotive, a lot of automotive, spent about 15 years in-house automotive, worked with my hands up through engineering and development, and then on into the educational learning aspect at some big companies. So I saw it firsthand. We're always short on the shop floor of skilled trades. And usually we have, Jim or Janice that works day shift Monday through Friday, and they're the ones with the answers that can solve all the problems. But the issue is when it's 2 a.m. And Mikey has a machine down, has a line down, operations is down, and breathing heavy on Mikey because now it's all on him. If Mikey doesn't have that knowledge, there's always going to be a knowledge gap from the best performer to the lowest performer. And it's magnified when we have this shortage of skilled trades. So that's where I identified that education can really help bridge the gap. And so I've seen that for 30 years on the shop floor. And then today where I'm at is I've combined all that knowledge and experience with the latest technology to bridge that gap, to help give those ones with less knowledge on the shop floor an access point without waking up Jim or Janice at 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning because they don't like those calls.
No, I would understand that. So what are some of the kinds of solutions that you see starting to emerge to address those challenges?
The keywords out there, it's work instructions or connected worker. It's bringing those two islands together, the island of the individual who is seeking knowledge and the island that's full of knowledge. How can we bring that together closer so they have access to that knowledge? And the industry has done really well about addressing new forms and new ways to bring that knowledge and put it in the hands of employees in I guess you'd call it a teacher-student scenario. But that only covers about 20% of a person's education. Learning theory states that 70% of learning is on the job. And if you have even old school shop manual, operations manual, you're out there on the machine, it's dirty, it's dim, you're looking through something, 100-page manual, and you can't find what you're looking for. We have some new tools out there. People will grab a tablet, grab a laptop. So now most techs are out there with their laptops and their tablets. And even so, they're still, as long as they're holding that tablet or laptop, they can't be working because skilled trades is really, I think it's inherent in the definition. Skilled trades are people who work with their hands. And if their hands are full with a tablet, a laptop, they're not going to be able to actually do the work. So it's still just in the olden days, picking up a manual and setting it down to do some work, and then giving a little bit of whiplash with the head going back and forth, looking from one to the other. So that's what I'm hoping to augment right now with PocketMentor. PocketMentor is that voice in your ear where it's like calling up your supervisor. It's like calling up Jim or Janice at 2 a.m. on a Saturday and saying, hey, talk me through this repair. You don't have to actually wake Jim or Janice up. You have this access right at your earbuds.
Well, and that sounds like such a better system because you're talking about people leafing through a 100-page manual. And frankly, I can't imagine seeing a younger worker coming into a plant and doing that. Somebody that's been at the plant for 40 years that knows approximately where those things are in the manual if they have questions. But to have that access using technology, that's one of the ways how we're going to attract and keep the digital natives coming into the workforce now. So when you're seeing some of the biggest inefficiencies or pain points, we just talked about the manual, the operating manual, and having the tablet or the phone in your hands. Are there other pain points or inefficiencies that are also happening that this new system is helping with?
I think it speaks generationally. And I'm not rooting for one generation or another, but there's separate knowledge. I grew up different. You grew up different than the 20-somethings that are out there working today, and even the 30 and 40-somethings. So the old school way, I say old school, but I compartmentalize my life. So I feel like I'm walking in the future right now, Lisa. So forgive me if I call something old school, because about 99% of the companies out there are still doing it this way. When you learn on the job, and that's the way a trade apprenticeship work, when you learn on the job, you get hired in, you make sure you go through your safety, your lockout, tagouts, and then they release you to the floor. And for somebody new coming in, They don't have that connection with the old guard, with the older generations, the experience that's out there. So when they come in and they're said, all right, you work with Tom today and work with Jim tomorrow, maybe Tom and Jim each have 15, 20, 30, 40 years sometimes, or even more. There's a little bit of reluctance of engaging between generations because of perceived bias and actual bias. And it's a little bit sensitive. So the old guard is here. And you know what? A lot of them do want to help, but then they don't speak the language that the new employees speak when they come in. So there's that disconnect. There's that communication disconnect. So there's a natural barrier for that learning transfer. And that's from the old guard side. And if we go from the perspective of the young generation that's coming in, and I say young generation, 20s, 30s, even 40s, they come in and they don't know how to speak to the old guard or shop language, right? Every business has their own language. Manufacturers have been around. There's some shop language. I'm talking about the clean shop language.
Right.
They'll referring to a process or something else. It's like they're learning a new language. So what PocketMentor does, it bridges that by allowing the experienced personnel to actually stay on the job and work. And it allows the younger personnel, once they get the basics behind them and we're sure that they're going to be safe, it allows them to talk to something they know, and they know technology. So they can just scan a QR code on a machine and in their ear it says, "Hi, Josh, are you ready to PM this press?" "Yeah, sure. All right. So where do I start?" "Are you sure everything's locked out there, Josh?" "Oh, absolutely. Did you go through your checks?" And then PocketMentor, conversationally, it's a voice that comes through their ears, so it leaves their hands free. And here's the big thing I see in the younger generation, and I've got children from 20s to 30s. They tell me this straight up. They like to speak to technology because there's no fear of being judged.
Interesting. So that's interesting. So what are some of the strategies that you've seen when you're introducing new tech to teams who might be hesitant or concerned about automation and job security? Because we do run into that a lot with the quote unquote old guard, that they think that all this AI and technology is going to replace them when it's really not. The only people who are going to be replaced, I think, are the ones that don't use technology.
Agreed, Lisa. Yeah, absolutely. What you're speaking to now is change management. There's change management on the technical side where we're keeping track of code, but on the psychological side, there's the social change management. And I spent half a decade at Amazon teaching change management. It's about communications. I worked as a learning PM for our RME org, which is reliability, maintenance, and engineering. And that's the question. What you just asked, I would hear that in every classroom. So it's about setting expectations in advance, not coming in and just flipping the switch. It's about communicating top to bottom, and more importantly, bottom to top, and really running a PR campaign when anything new comes in. It doesn't have to be just technology. It could be about moving the production line from building 1 to building 2. There's always the naysayers that are pushing back, the negative Nellies. And then there's the others that don't speak at all, but they're quietly resisting. And then you always have a certain percentage that are happy for any change just because their mind works that way. Yeah, what you're speaking to, that change management, any technology, it has a little bit more of a barrier just because technology and job loss. But the process is communicative change management, and the actual message to come out in this scenario is that skilled trades, there's not enough of you already. There is not enough. So let's enable you to do more with what you have. Skilled trades, there's always a chip on your shoulder because people look in life, in history, look down upon, at least the last 100 years since the Industrial Revolution, look down on skilled trades. But we know that it's a different take now. all that coming together is, I think we have a good shot at ramping up that technology usage to a good, steady point that will ultimately serve the proposed manufacturing expansion that North America is hoping to experience here in the next 4 years.
Yeah. So what are you seeing as far as the frontline workers starting to use voice accessible or real-time AI in their daily routines? So, what's changing and how this kind of support gets delivered on the floor, basically?
I can tell you that the managers welcome it, because typically the managers end up being a proxy trainer. And now they have a line, even on the operations side, that front line, everybody's always coming to the manager, the floor personnel, especially if they're new, and asking for decisions, advice. So that leaves the managers babysitting, we call it, on the shop floor. But after everybody else leaves, whether it's an 8, 10, or 12-hour shift, managers end up stuck there on the job afterwards doing their management, their administrative side, because their time was taken up all day long being a teacher. And we can quantify that, but in most cases we don't. It ends up being hours that are worked beyond the normal realm, and it shows up in fatigue, employee attrition, lower job performance, whether it was their issue or not, if companies just are not recognizing what's going on.
So do you have any examples or use cases that show what this shift can look like in practice?
I guess the best use case is frontline workers on the operations floor having the PMBs that are on the side of a machine can only take you so far. But what it could look like for a company today is that not only their skilled trades have the knowledge at their earbuds level to fix machines when they go down, reducing downtime, improving uptime, raising those OEE numbers. But operations likes to adapt to systems like this because operations has a higher turnover than skilled trades. Skilled trades has a shortage because there's not enough out there to hire. So if we get past that barrier, that'll help that. Operations floor, on the other side, they hire, honestly, I've been at places, they'll hire anybody and everybody with a pulse, as we call it, right? And so how do you babysit again? This is shop floor talk. It's how do we keep track and support the operations personnel through their onboarding so they learn enough to feel like they're producing, because employees that feel like they're producing have a higher job satisfaction. And whether it's operations floor, whether it's skilled trades, that increased job satisfaction keeps them around.
The thing that I think about, and probably a question on a lot of people's minds listening to that, is the access of security. If somebody is listening, and as a regular user and a big fan of ChatGPT, I know that AI is basically like the Wizard of Oz. It's know all, be all. But for people who are concerned about giving away their intellectual property, their trade secrets, any of those type of things, how does it ensure that you're keeping your company's specific knowledge and IP in-house?
They should continue to ask those questions because IP is definitely important. If we step back for a moment, I like to bring in game theory, and game theory basics of it states that even competitors, if you work cooperatively, competitors working cooperatively actually both produce more. So I think that's one philosophy that could help move the needle a little bit. But at the same time, the IP, what makes you different than the next company? Why do you produce 10 times as much as company B, et cetera? Yeah, that stuff does need to be safeguarded. And I would say that's where a lot of times IT department gets involved. And so there's Q&A. So our system, for one, the ChatGPT, it's a global AI. And so anything going in can go anywhere. Our system, without giving away our trade secrets, Lisa, our system puts guardrails on the AI, and we make sure that we synchronize with the IT departments and the security at each company just as they would with any other vendor that they work with.
Okay. So what roles are you seeing these tools play in shaping culture? Because, of course, culture is probably my favorite topic to talk about on this. But when it comes to employee confidence, knowledge sharing, safety practices, all of those things rolled into one.
Great question. Culture is important. Depending on the perspective, it could be the most important. Culture, I think, ties right into job performance because do I feel like I'm doing something worthwhile? So we introduced last week something called Connections HR, which is it's a connectivity. I guess you'd call it a plug-in using today's vernacular. But during those conversations, when PocketMentor is walking a skilled tradesperson through, whether it be a PM, a repair, a root cause analysis to get the machine back up and running, we can add, and again, this has to be approved by HR and all the employees involved, questions throughout the day. How are you feeling today, Lisa? How are you feeling today, Derek? And we can slip those questions in and anonymize it. And then on the back end, just from an aggregate, without any ties to anybody's name, the HR division can actually get a grasp on the employee morale, right? Employee morale is what we said 20 years ago. Today we call it mental health awareness. So it's a way to check in and really solve two problems at a time. And that speaks to the new generation. The new generation, as my daughter says, connects less. They want to do things for themselves. And so if they can get answers on their own, they feel like they're doing a better job, and they can share how they feel with an AI differently than they can. When you're done, walk into HR, tell me what's what. How are you feeling today? It's my manager asking me the question, how am I supposed to respond? The anonymous feedback helps keep the culture, helps keep the reality of what the C-suite believes culture is. And through that transparency of aggregate anonymized data can help tell everybody where we're at, and then you can make adjustments from that point.
Well, that's a really nice add-on to it. The other thing that came to mind is I know that a lot of times when I'm using chat, and again, that's my preferred AI, I have to tell it, don't make stuff up. How do you prevent it from hallucinating? AI is tending to do when it feels that it has a good answer that's completely unverified and a lot of times just stupid.
Gosh, do you have children?
I have kittens.
Oh, okay, kittens. I've got children, and I'm just curious to the parents that are out there. What do you say to your children to keep them from making stuff up? It's really in setting expectations. So similar to how our children are trained and students are trained, and Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts, and anybody that is in a mentor-mentee scenario, we put guardrails on the technology and to limit the exposure. That hallucination that it made headlines at the beginning of the year, right? There's a big turn and uptick in AI in January and since then. So the hallucinations, all the naysayers were saying, see, I told you, and they're pointing fingers. But those hallucinations come from having multiple answers to the same question. So when we ask a question of ChatGPT, just like before AI, if we're in Google search, we start typing what we're searching for. And have you seen how it kind of anticipates searches?
Right.
Okay. So if you can imagine all the different times the same question or similar questions have been asked, and then those answers being produced, the ChatGPTs of the world have been trained on essentially the entire knowledge base, which is the entire internet. And so they have all these answers in the back of their mind, if we can anthropomorphize the LLMs here for a moment. So when you ask a question of an LLM and they respond, they're giving you an answer that has been maybe the most popular. It might not be the one that you're looking for, but it's the one that, 4 out of 5 dentists choose.
Right.
Right. It's randomized. So the way that PocketMentor works and the way our philosophy works at Practical AI is that we want to make sure that we get relevant information and we contain the answers to just the knowledge base that is furnished to us by the company we're working with.
So looking ahead, how do you see this real-time support tech evolving in manufacturers? And what should companies be preparing for now to keep pace with it?
Ooh, wow. Real-time support. It's the internet wave came around, and the internet is not so much technological as it was at bringing communities together. We can ask a question, and then 12 time zones away, we get an answer within seconds. And that response time, the minimized response time, has allowed us to work together as people, separate the technology from other than the transmission of the words, but it's allowed us to increase iteration of everything we do. It allows us to collaborate with many more minds than we would. It allows us to eliminate bias at a higher rate because we're getting more input because of the reduced cycle time of questions, answers, words across. So what a company should be looking at is, and OEE speaks to this. OEE talks about reducing each of the choke points and recognizing what the problems really are, the restrictions in the flow, and eliminating a whole bunch of little ones. And that's like a long tail effect, which ultimately it turns out to be a massive enhancement of uptime. So I would ask companies out there to just get with their maintenance teams and say, okay, and their controls teams, anybody that runs a scan, all the sensors that are already out there, they have the data, and just quantify what that downtime is per hour, per day, week, month, and year. And just say, hey, why do we have that downtime? And most times it's going to be because we did not have somebody with enough knowledge to get the machine up. We had to wait for a shift for the knowledgeable to come up. We had to wait for a weekend for the knowledgeable to come in, or sometimes we had to go to the OEM and have them bringing in an expert that might be honestly a week or two or a month away. Those experts at the OEMs, they're far and few between. They're not waiting by their telephone. They schedule out because they're making money another way. All this downtime, and not just downtime, but reduced production rates because we're trying to get by, adds up. So that's where I would suggest companies start, Lisa, is just figuring out and quantifying what the downtime is and measuring, was it separate the repair time from the arrival time of that knowledge. So there could be a half hour, it could be a 15-minute fix, but if there is a 15 minutes to get the knowledge person there and 15 minutes to get it running, now you're just doubling the downtime. So if the initial person that's working that floor shows up with the knowledge at their earbud level, then they can get it up and running in 15 minutes because it's a 15-minute fix. So something just that simple could halve the downtime, which would dramatically increase uptime production for operations. And operations would love you for that.
Awesome. So just share with us, as we're getting to the end of our time together, exactly what do you do? What is Practical AI? What is PocketMentor? And if somebody wanted to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Thank you, Lisa. Practical AI the name is embedded into our philosophy, our reality here, because we control our own reality. There's lots of headlines, buzzwords that either the sky is falling and Chicken Little's running around, or AI is the next best savior and it's going to solve all our problems, so I'll just twiddle my thumbs so that happens. There's a practical aspect. Instead of waiting, there's technology that we can put to use today, practical in a pragmatic way, that can solve problems safely, efficiently, and cooperatively between humans and technology. That's where the practical and practical AI comes in. PocketMentor it's AI without technology. So it's actually, companies do not need to buy a tablet. They don't need to buy a laptop. They don't need to buy special glasses. They don't need to buy any additional technology. every worker has access to, through a mobile phone, scan a QR code on a machine, and it dials the knowledge base AI for that machine, that operation, that PM, that process. And it's just a conversation like you and I are having now. And we've anthropomorphized our AI in such a way, it sounds like a human being. It jokes, it laughs, it checks in to see if you're okay. It wants to make sure, it praises you when you've completed a task. All these things that sometimes we as humans lack because we feel pressured and there's not enough time on the clock to do everything that we know we should be doing. That's what PocketMentor does. And that's our flagship product, Practical AI. So putting all these things together, and if anybody's out there and interested in taking a look, taking a spin, seeing how that engine purrs, they can go to practicalai.app. So that's Practical AI and then .app, like Apple Paul, and that will take them to all the information that they can desire.
All right. Derek, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I learned a lot, and it was great to chat with you.
I'm glad your spotlight's on Indianapolis this week. Who do you think's going to win the race?
I have no idea, but it'll be fun to watch.
It will be fun to watch. I think when this releases, we'll all know, though, won't we?
Yes.
Thank you again, Lisa, for your time here, and stay dry and enjoy your weekend.
All right. Thanks again. I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you and your industry friends hang out. The bigger and faster we grow the network, the stronger and deeper the community we'll all have. Thanks again, and I appreciate you.